folks in the market don't want 6 different Bitcoin companies, right? They want one where they can do everything they need, whether that's, hold for the long term, have liquidity out of that cold storage, being able to buy or sell, which I'm pretty sure there's still very few places on the market that you can do that, buy and sell directly out of cold storage. And then we can touch further on kind of the unique account types, right? To my knowledge, this is still the only place where you can have an IRA, where you retain majority key control, Roth, traditional SEP, and then also those trust accounts to go further on the inheritance side and helping folks avoid probate. And again, to the trade-offs, right? Making sure that Bitcoin stays private and pass away.
Bitcoin is a currency on the internet.
If you don't trust any other currency, this is where you go.
It's going to outperform everything.
Bitcoin could eventually be worthless.
Every day is a good day to buy Bitcoin.
Bitcoin reached its highest price to date.
Bitcoin hitting a new high. It really has reached escape velocity.
There is no second best.
Who cares about Bitcoin?
It's the only secure database that's ever been invented.
Antisocial.
Bitcoin is the real deal.
Stupid.
Everything is bullish for Bitcoin.
Immoral.
It's going up forever, Laura.
Fix the money, fix the world.
WhiteOak is a registered investment advisor, and the opinions expressed on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of the Silk LLC. Joining this as a CPA, and the opinions expressed on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Trusted CPA or other affiliated firms. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and unless otherwise stated are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as a recommendation appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice.
Welcome to Bitcoin for Financial Services Media, the podcast where sound money meets professional services. We explore how to build the financial services industry within the principles, values, and ethos of Bitcoin. Today we're joined by Ben Bryla, Director of Sales at Unchained. Let's get started. Welcome back to Bitcoin for Financial Services Media. We're stoked. Great guest today, veteran of the Bitcoin for Financial Services ecosystem, Ben Bryla, Director of Sales at Unchained. How you doing, Ben?
Doing great, Wyatt. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. So grateful for the chance to be on and contribute.
Of course. No, it's always fun to bring friends on the pod. You and I both work out of the space. We've gotten to know each other well over the last couple of years. You guys are doing great work at Unchained. So we're going to have a fruitful conversation. Partner of Basilic, so I've gotten to know you guys, well over the years as two. Recording on St. Patrick's Day here. I got my green on. Doesn't look like you're supporting the cause.
Well, that's the thing about recording from home, Wyatt, is you can't see what I'm wearing underneath. So I am
okay
on the low.
Well, we'll take it. Ben, why don't you give the audience a little bit about how you got into Bitcoin, how you got into Bitcoin professionally, and what you're doing now?
Sure. So my Bitcoin story is a bit of a sly roundabout way into Bitcoin. I grew up in the DC area, and I saw my mother, who leads a team of research nurses at NIH working with late stage cancer patients. And these folks, I think more than anyone else in the world, recognizes the scarcity of our time, the fact that time is truly our scarce asset. And, from there, what naturally tends to come is, how are we going to utilize our time, right? And so my personal goal became, how can I improve quality of life for as many folks as I can? And so I thought about going to medical school or PA school, ended up going into the free market and studied engineering and ended up working in medical sales. And what I found from that was that while the splints I was selling were helping folks with a, immediate injury or, temporary solution, the problem was that a lot of these folks were living check to check and still had no understanding of money and how it has such an outsized effect on quality of life. And so, shout out to Seb Bunny. I read his book, The Hidden Cost of Money, where he argues that everything is really downstream of money. And so from there, bit of a self-taught investor coming out of college, realized that Bitcoin is truly the best tool that I have in my toolbox to help improve quality of life for as many folks as I can. The Japanese concept of Ikigai kind of helped me get there. But for all intents and purposes, that's why I'm here, is because I believe that educating folks, individuals, institutions on Bitcoin is really the best way for me to help improve their quality of life and help them make the most of our time, our scarce asset.
No, it's beautiful. We love those personal connections. I think it makes coming to Bitcoin that much more real, that much more purposeful. So you're kind of going down this Bitcoin rabbit hole. What gave you the conviction to jump into it professionally?
Yeah. One of those situations where you have to go really low to go high and to figure out, your true mission. And part of that was, unfortunately, through a severe fracture of my leg. I was playing soccer and fractured my tibial plateau, had to go in for a surgery that, I never wanted, with a bunch of screws and hardware. And the surgeon described it as a career remodeling injury. So what that gave me was a ton of time to think, right, about how I'm using my time. And it also gave me a lot more time to continue on, down the never ending rabbit hole to learn more and more about Bitcoin. And I think over the years, my conviction grew. And then that was kind of the nail in the coffin where I realized, look, I have to get up every day and work on, what is most important, back to the Ikigai concept, so that I am fulfilled and can also ensure that I'm helping others and doing something that I think is meaningful. And after, transitioning from medical sales to software sales, I think a lot of that meaning wasn't there, right? Because I don't know, we've all spent time in and around SaaS, and it's a very cutthroat environment. Whereas when I wake up and get to help folks secure Bitcoin for the long haul and potentially affect their bloodline and generations to come, that I know is worthwhile.
This episode is brought to you by Satoshi Pacioli, a full-service accounting and tax firm built for the Bitcoin economy. If you run a Bitcoin business, mine Bitcoin, or invest in it, you need advisors who actually understand how this industry works. Satoshi Pacioli handles bookkeeping, financial reporting, tax compliance, and strategic planning for Bitcoin-focused companies and individuals. They speak the language of Bitcoiners and help you stay compliant while building for the long term. To learn more or book a consultation, visit satoshipacioli.com.
Yeah, very cool. Appreciate the background. That's great for you to share. So let's get into what you do at Unchained, what Unchained is, and we'll kind of jump off from there.
Sure thing. So Unchained provides a full suite of financial services for Bitcoiners. So we've been around for close to a decade at this point.
And you guys started in 2016?
We did. Yeah. So we're coming
10-year anniversary this year.
Later this year, exactly.
No kidding.
And I feel like in the Bitcoin space, those are like dog years or something, right? Like it feels like
for real.
And so the core of Unchained is collaborative custody. So I know, a lot of your folks are experienced Bitcoiners, but, for those that don't know, I think maybe let's level set a little bit, right? So there are 21 million Bitcoin. All of them live on addresses. And each of those addresses is secured by either a single or multiple private keys. Now, most individuals start buying Bitcoin on an exchange, and that's fine, right? There's little friction. The issue there is that as you accumulate more Bitcoin, you understand who's holding the private keys. And when you're holding Bitcoin on an exchange or with a custodian, they are typically holding the private key or private keys. And so over time, as you start to secure more and more Bitcoin, that tends to become an unacceptable level of risk. And Bitcoiners, as they understand the ethos of not your keys, not your coins, tend to want to secure those keys on their own. And so they might go to, a single signature setup where they have a device and a backup seed phrase, under the bed or in the safe. But the issue there is that if that seed phrase is compromised, your Bitcoin is as good as gone. And so for high net worth individuals and institutions who are stacking very material amounts of Bitcoin, that type of risk doesn't make sense and is unacceptable. So folks start to consider collaborative custody built on multi-signature custody. So imagine instead of a single key securing your Bitcoin, there are three. And with our clients, they're typically holding the majority. So they're holding, let's say, 2 keys, and Unchained holds the third. What this provides for our clients is really the best of both worlds, because they know that they retain key control. They're the only party in the world that can unilaterally move their Bitcoin. But at the same time, they now have some room for error. So if something happens to one of those keys, if a house burns down, something that's out of your control, it's not the end of the world. You can come back to Unchained. We can help you resecure that third key and continue to secure your Bitcoin. And what we find is that as folks grow their Bitcoin conviction and their the amount of Bitcoin they hold in turn, they want to work with a group that they can trust, but they don't have to, right? And that's the beauty of this model, is that you kind of have your cake and eat it too, in terms of you, the client, retaining key control, but Unchained being here in the event that something happens to one of those keys. Or to take it a step further, and I'm sure we'll get into this type of model lends itself really well to things like inheritance. And I know a lot of Bitcoiners see Bitcoin as a generational asset. So, it doesn't make sense to spend all this time and energy stacking if you're not going to be sure that it's going to efficiently pass on to your heirs.
100%. And that's a great level setting point. And so we have, Unchained. I love working with you guys. I refer to you guys as like the premier Bitcoin financial services company in the country. I mean it with every word. And so we have this custody solution, 2 through multi-sig, core, your guys' core business. And then as you guys have grown, have added additional financial services on top of that. We got loans, we got IRAs, we got OTC desk, inheritance protocol. And for my seat, it's just been so easy to onboard to you guys. My clients have like a one-stop shop. I think it's fairly easy for traditional RIAs to think of Unchained as kind of like their pseudo like Bitcoin custodian. Obviously, you guys don't take full custody of people's coins. You're a partner in that. But your setup is so flexible. I love like this 2 or 3 base, because it just provides us so many different opportunities. And one thing we really focus on with our clientele, especially with Bitcoin still be kind of its store of value phase, moving to medium of exchange here quickly, is making sure we have a rock solid foundation for our custody solution. And there is no silver bullet when it comes to Bitcoin self-custody. It's a series of trade-offs, and you kind of touched on some of those. And you guys have made it tremendously easy for a client to hold 2 keys in the quorum. Your connections feature is awesome. That's why I utilize my client. If I'm holding key in the quorum, we're able to geographically distribute 3 keys now. So if they lose their key, and myself and Unchained can help set up a new wallet. Obviously leads to inheritance planning as well. Why don't you kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how connections work? Because I really feel like that is like the most pivotal tool for advisors or folks in my seat. And I really do, my prediction for the future is it's going to be much more commonplace for Bitcoin holders to have their financial advisor, to have their CPA, to have their estate planning attorney hold a key for them. It's really not too intimidating from the service provider point of view, because you guys made it super easy on your platform. So walk us through how that actually works.
Absolutely. This goes to the roots of Unchained, which is thinking about key control as establishing a network of keys. And because we've created the Unchained platform built natively into the Bitcoin network, it allows for these type of connections. So I think, in a story form, this might make a little more sense to folks, right? So imagine, you are the Bitcoiner in your family, you get set up with Unchained, and then you have some relatives who, would benefit from this type of service, but maybe they're not ready to hold multiple keys, right? Maybe you kind of want to help them dip their toes into the water and become comfortable before, assuming the majority key control, or maybe they never have to do that. And so you can imagine you have your Unchained account, you can send a connection request to someone else to help them create an account, and then their account is actually connected to yours on the back end through our platform. And so this allows for a few things, right? At the core, it could be that they are able to create a multi-signature account with Unchained where they only have to deal with controlling one device. So now you have the benefits of multi-sig, but they don't have the complexity there. So that's, I think, the first use case where, let's say you have an older relative and you want them to have this setup available to them. You create that connections, they upload one key, then you're able to then build a vault constructed of their key, one key that you already have on the platform, and then the Unchained key. And so now they have the benefit of this 2 out of 3 multi-sig quorum. And what it does is it lends itself very well to things like inheritance. So if you're already connected to that account on our platform, it's going to make the inheritance even more seamless. Whereas typically, you're going to set up that inheritance protocol and keep that with your estate planning attorney or your trustee. But the point is, we want to meet folks where they are, right? And we understand that, there may be folks in your family who never go down the rabbit hole as far as you, and they don't want to understand multi-signature custody, and that's okay, right? They can still benefit. They don't need to be in a situation where they are vulnerable to single points of failure, right? We've seen the rise in scammers and fraudulent folks trying to steal Bitcoin. And I would say that utilizing these checks and balances goes a long way for those who are not as technically Bitcoin inclined.
Well, it really does. And I give you guys a huge tip of the cap for your game theory when designing the platform. I think it gives people a lot of confidence and trust. Myself, using a connections, clients can determine how much information they want to share with me, so they're comfortable with that. I can sign a transaction after the client initiates it. I can't initiate a transaction myself. The account owner has to be the one to actually broadcast the transaction to the network. And so there's a lot of safeguards that you guys have intentionally built in, which I think is really great. And especially when you're working with a more Bitcoin focused, individual, they get extremely scrupled about their custody solution, as they should. And they ask a lot of questions like, how do I not get rugged in this scenario? And it's, physically impossible with the way you guys have, set things up, which, provides myself with a lot of comfort, provides my clients with a lot of comfort. And so it just works, which is, an issue we find a lot in Bitcoin land is like, does this actually work? And so that's fantastic. And, it helps a lot too. I was honestly kind of nervous when I was first getting started. It's like, oh man, my compliance consultant is not going to like this. And I walked them through the platform. My role in holding one of the 3 keys in quorum, he's like, no, this is fine. Like, you don't have custody. You can't unilaterally move your client's Bitcoin. There's a bunch of other things I have to take into account. If I have custody of clients' assets, and you guys just make it very easy to help provide folks with sound custody solutions.
100%. And I think something that you said stuck out there in terms of, how early we really are. Because a lot of individuals come to Bitcoin on their own, but others just, hear it through the grapevine. And so we serve both individuals and institutions. And I was talking to a business leader the other day who just thought that, holding Bitcoin on behalf of an enterprise was a non-starter because, he thought one person had to hold the keys. And so when we had a, basic conversation around the ability for multiple keys, you could immediately see the light bulb go on in his head, and the ability to, set up a business account with us and then create perhaps a flexible quorum where it's maybe 2 out of 3 or it's 3 out of 5, or maybe it's 2 out of 3 with some additional approver levels, right? Maybe you have a board of 5 folks and only 2 are prepared or able to hold keys, but you'd like approval from the other 3 when a transaction is broadcast. We have that flexibility, and I think simplicity is also key to Unchained at its core. Folks in the market don't want 6 different Bitcoin companies, right? They want one where they can do everything they need, whether that's hold for the long term, have liquidity out of that cold storage, being able to buy or sell, which I'm pretty sure there's still very few places on the market that you can do that, buy and sell directly out of cold storage. And then we can touch further on kind of the unique account types, right? To my knowledge, this is still the only place where you can have an IRA, where you retain majority key control, Roth, traditional SEP, and then also those trust accounts to go further on the inheritance side and helping folks avoid probate. And again, to the trade-offs, right? Making sure that Bitcoin stays private when you pass away.
Totally. It maybe was one of the biggest decision-making criteria when I was trying to figure out who like my Bitcoin partner was going to be in this practice. And I mean, yeah, you obviously want to reduce as much friction as possible for onboarding clients. You want a seamless user interface, like a one-stop shop. And so just the fact that you guys are able to accommodate all those different account types, that's obviously what a traditional brokerage service or custodian is going to offer. So we don't have to go here for our IRA, we don't have to go there for our trust, we don't have to go XYZ for our loan. It's all built in natively in the platform. And in that vein, what have you guys seen actual boots on the ground for feature requests, whether that be from RIAs like myself, accountants, estate planning attorneys are on the professional side, and then also from the end client user perspective? How do you envision this platform growing, and if you guys have any plans to add on additional features and services?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We're always trying to stay on top of what folks in the market are looking for, and I would say it's a balancing act between, and I think this is a testament to why we've been around for close to a decade, between staying in your lane, right, knowing what you do really well and leaning into those aspects, which currently right now with us is custody, trading, and then commercial lending, and making sure that you're the best in the business at those things, while also continuing to grow and listening to our clients and hearing what they have to say. And so I would say one limitation you could argue of our platform right now is that we have a $2,000 minimum trade size. That's because these Bitcoin buys are being deposited directly into cold storage. So we're cognizant of UTXO sizing on that front. But in terms of perhaps ease of use or ability for you to kind of even consolidate all your Bitcoin needs even further, I would love to see something like a DCA function, right, to support smaller buys, and perhaps a custodial type account where you can accumulate small amounts of Bitcoin, and then when it's a certain UTXO size, that could migrate into cold storage. But I think another component that we've heard loud and clear from our clients is how important the human aspect is, right? You can't assemble a team like this overnight. That's part of the reason why it's taken close to a decade. I'd encourage everybody to go check out our blog and our knowledge base, because we have some of the top thought leaders in the space. And so whenever there's a tricky Bitcoin topic that I'm trying to dig deeper on, that's typically where I'll go. But on the human note, I would say knowing that you can actually meet the Unchained team in person is huge. So we do as much as we can in terms of boots on the ground. You and I spend a lot of time and labor of love here at the space in Denver. I run the local Boulder Bitcoin meetup. So shout out to all my folks here in Colorado. We're always growing and looking to improve there. And I would say that through our signature service, which is more of our private client experience, those folks are getting invited to private client events around the country. And it goes a long way when you're that, weird Bitcoin guy in your friends or family circle that, has hopefully not quite been totally ostracized yet, that you can actually go out and, have a nice dinner with other folks who are on the same page as you. Or, I know, we're working on an event down in Nashville where they're going to go out and shoot some guns, and we have a wine tasting coming up here at the space with Ben Justman. Shout out Peony Lane. So I think that emphasis as well. Obviously, we have the best technical infrastructure in Bitcoin, but I think the team that backs it up and being able to interact with that team is huge for a lot of our folks.
It's actually massive. I'm happy you brought that up because, yeah, something you and I have discussed, offline, obviously in our own ventures. Like the community aspect of Bitcoin is super important. I think it's one of the best investments you can make. It's just getting to know other Bitcoiners, learning from other Bitcoiners in real life. Obviously, the internet's great, but nothing meets those in-person interactions. Unchained, I can attest, there's great parties. So it's always it's always a good time getting together with the Unchained folks. And even in my personal experience, I've reached out to you, I reached out to Rocky, hey, I'm having like this issue. What do you think about this? I know you guys, I know I'm talking to a human on the other end. If you guys have been sure, like directing me to, support, I had this one issue and like 4 support guys jumped on to like try to help me, solve it with my client. And it was just really reassuring to know, we were getting good advice. There were real humans based in, North America that were ready, willing, and able to help us. It gave my client huge peace of mind. And so I really do give you guys props for not skimping on that. I think it's, fairly easy once you get to a big scalable business like Unchained to, kind of cut corners, and you haven't. Like the support is tremendous. And especially from, professional services too. It's like I'm used to being able to, my TradFi providers, call somebody and talk to people on the phone. I feel like Bitcoin companies, a lot of times they want to lean into like the tech angle. Here's your chat bot. And it's like, no, I don't want to talk to the AI. I want to talk to a real guy.
Right. Are you guys like, it's like, are you even in the US? Like, where do you guys, like, do you have a location?
Totally. I always joke too. I'm trying to catch all my Unchained Pokemon. I'm working through them. I've met quite a few guys. You guys are growing fast, so it's making it harder, on me. But another thing, I want to discuss with you, your boots on the ground guy, talking to real Bitcoiners every day. And you and I have talked about it too. It's like this interesting conundrum. I don't really like talking about price, but we definitely notice that our pipeline fills up when price goes up. You got to do a little bit more legwork to get leads and talk to folks when price goes down. So I'm just really curious, what are your just general perspective strategies, folks sitting in a professional services role, how you're talking to clients about Bitcoin in good and bad markets, what the feedback is like, how you're converting them and still trying to emphasize like the importance of your services, even when it may not seem obvious to them with the price action of the day.
Yeah. So I think there's a few different ways we do that. I think part of it is that, we always stick with the ethos that bear markets are for building, right? And so what you're going to see, what you see more out of Unchained in these times is more content, right? So we've been doing more work to put out more research. We just put out a piece on quantum, as that seems like kind of the FUD du jour lately.
FUD du jour, I like that.
Yeah. And it's just, I paused a little bit because, just to quickly flip back to the community side, right? We're around the guys who are the lead developers at the space for these quantum resistant proposals. So when you're seeing that on a day-to-day basis, it helps you deal with that FUD, and you're also able to speak to it truthfully, right? It's not like, hey, I just heard this thing X and Y. It's like, hey, I actually got to talk to, Hunter and Jeff and these guys who are actually, authoring the BIPs. So you get to see, one, the level of urgency in terms of, that particular FUD. And then just the beautiful anti-fragility of the Bitcoin network in terms of, hey, there's this attack. We're going to reinforce ourselves and make ourselves stronger so that we can defend against it. I would also say that, from a sales perspective, it's almost impossible to do like cold Bitcoin outbound, right? Because you just come off like a scammer. So a lot of the times it's those warm relationships. It's working with folks who are already using the product, and hey, how can is there anybody else in your network who we can help, who might benefit from this because it's been so helpful to you. And always beating the drum on education, right? So how many Bitcoin lending companies have we seen go down in the last decade, right? It's almost countless at this point. I'm pretty sure Blockfil's filed for bankruptcy, in the last couple weeks. And so I would implore, without providing any sort of financial advice, I'd implore anyone who's looking at commercial Bitcoin-backed loans to do your extreme due diligence on your relationship to your collateral, because that's what we pride ourselves on here at Unchained, is that you are closer to your collateral than you are anywhere else, because it's held in a multi-signature vault where instead of you holding two keys, you hold one. So Unchained holds the second, and then a third party arbiter holds the third, meaning that all three parties have constant visibility into the Bitcoin on chain, ensuring that it's not being rehypothecated at all or sent to any sort of third party during the life of the loan, but also ensuring that none of the three parties has unilateral ability to access that collateral during the life of that loan. So I think during these lulls in price action, it's a time to continue to hone and refine your knowledge, so that you're ready to take opportunity going forward. And then from a personal experience, when folks are hey Ben, I thought Bitcoin wasn't going to be as volatile anymore, et cetera, et cetera. I hear you, but at the same time, what I can tell you from experience is, one, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. If you can't do that, you should plant that thing today. And two, most of us Bitcoiners have way more Bitcoin now than we ever would have without those significant drawdowns in the past. So see it as an opportunity, back to basics, produce more than you consume, and then you're have the ability to accumulate Bitcoin with the excess.
Totally. I think that's a great answer. And it's also a great example of that core 2-3 multi-sig, at work, in the loan product. I have a lot of interest from clients in Bitcoin collateralized loans. I think it's like a great tool, but even some of the work I'm doing with my private credit fund, evaluating like these loan servicers and originators, it honestly gives me so much more respect and thankfulness for Unchained, because things can get a little dicey behind the scenes. Are you pooling collateral? Is that collateral pledged to a different party, or is like, if everything is core 2-3 multi-sig, like the exact address your Bitcoin collateral is held, exactly under what circumstances it can move or not, and so it's just crucially IRA product functions similarly. And it is, really important.
Your wealth deserves intention. Basilic Financial is a Bitcoin-focused wealth management firm built to help our clients find balance between money and meaning. We integrate sound money strategies across 4 distinct personalized services: financial planning, individual wealth management, retirement services for SMBs, and Bitcoin financial services. Your prosperity, your purpose, intentionally guided at Basilic Financial. Visit our website at basilic.io to schedule a free consultation.
Absolutely. Not sure if this was on your list of stuff to cover, but happy to go further into the IRA if that's relevant.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
That is one of my favorite products at Unchained, so I'm happy to give it some airtime.
Oh yeah, and I mean, when you sit down, I'm sure when you sit down with your clients, like oftentimes, what we see is kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? Is like the old 401k or the old IRA that they may or may not have even checked out in years, and who knows if it's invested, what it's invested in, how it's performing. So that was the immediate wake-up call to me a few years ago when I learned that this was even an option. Was, hey, been stacking up a 401k through medical sales, and sure enough, can't buy Bitcoin in there. So the ability to seamlessly create an IRA to IRA transfer or a 401k to IRA rollover through our platform is really efficient. And I know in the past, those types of transfers have typically taken like weeks, but we have a really smooth integration in there. And, we often see the funds come over in, 1 to 3 or 4 days now, depending on the current custodian. But for anyone out there listening, if you're thinking, you kind of racking your brain on ways to get more Bitcoin exposure, this is one way that maybe a lot of folks haven't considered. And so a couple unique advantages there would be, one, because it's true spot Bitcoin and you retain key control, in retirement, you can actually take distribution in kind. So you don't necessarily need to sell that Bitcoin to dollars when you're taking a distribution. So I think that's, one of the critical advantages. And then also, obviously pairing that with the liquidity portion makes it simple.
Totally. And one of the things, I mean, you see, even like BitcoinIRA.com, it's like essentially held like, crypto company. It's like pretty unflattering. There's a lot of unflattering crypto IRA products out there. I think the key innovation at Unchained is like this tri-party agreement. So all tax qualified accounts in the US, need a qualified custodian, right? It's like, well, when Bitcoiner alarm bells go off, it's like, I don't want somebody else custodying my Bitcoin. But you guys, work with Fortis Bank, which is fun enough, out of Denver, and they, agree to sign the, keys back over to you, all seamlessly done, in the background of the Unchained platform. And so you essentially have this Unchained vault and this IRS paper wrapper that's your IRA, and you still get to control your keys. And so it really is, I think, extremely clever and very unique product offering in the market. On product offerings, and then I kind of want to switch to your guys' outreach initiatives, but let's walk through the inheritance planning protocol. This is, I would say, very hot topic when we're talking custody solutions with clients is, yeah, I mean, you may have like this sick treasure map and, your seed phrase is buried in, Africa, and you got a signing device in the Antarctic Circle, and it's like, nobody's getting my Bitcoin, especially maybe your heirs. And so I think you guys, again, have thought out a really good protocol that, nearly anybody can implement. Walk us through the details of that and how you arrived on this specific procedure.
Yeah. So the core of this, like everything we do, is no single points of failure. And so, as you illustrated, we hear about these exotic multi-signatures.
Yeah.
Right? And like you said, no one's going to access the Bitcoin, right? And arguably not even your heirs, because unfortunately, oftentimes the Bitcoiner is the single point of failure. And so, yes, I hear you, hardcore Bitcoiner. You don't want anybody in the world to know how much Bitcoin you have. And I get that. And as Wyatt noted, every single setup has trade-offs. And so what we find is the majority of our clients see that the small trade-off in terms of privacy or knowledge of account on the Unchained side is well worth the massive benefits of the peace of mind and clarity that come with knowing you have a robust inheritance setup that you getting hit by a bus does not derail. And so there's really two ways to set that up with us. So you can either set it up on your own in a DIY fashion, or the majority of our clients who are seeing Bitcoin as a generational asset and perhaps have a lot more moving parts might use our signature service for 1 year, which is going to be that private client white glove experience where you're actually going to be working directly with the team and have a dedicated account manager to first, look at your Bitcoin picture in a holistic manner, right? Get you set up operationally, and then look at the inheritance component. And so if you have a trust, we can help you title Bitcoin to that trust. If you have a will, you can also look at it in terms of appropriating it into the will. But the beauty of this is basically it boils down to a packet of information that's inclusive of a copy of one of your seed phrases, as well as two executor letters that explain the process. That gets stored in a tamper-evident bag and is given to your trustee or your heir. And so now, heir or trustee doesn't have to be a Bitcoin wizard or guru. they have to understand that, if so-and-so passes away, I'm going to approach and work with Unchained, proving that they're no longer around, and then use the combination of this protocol with the third key that Unchained's already securing to then accomplish the wishes of the trust of the will in terms of moving Bitcoin accordingly.
Totally. And yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard some gripes from Maximus. I think it's pretty genius, like bulletproof way to go about custody in the most seamless way possible. If you don't already have professional service provider that is a key agent, yes, it's another copy the C phrase, but like we talked about earlier in the conversation, they don't have your account login, they can't initiate a transaction, they can't collude with Unchained, so it is fairly seamless. And even in the protocol, you guys urge clients to call this person every 6 months, make sure the bag isn't tampered with, make sure they know where the bag is. And so, we reduce any of that potential, human error. And so I think it's like the best, off the shelf inheritance protocol I've seen. And it really helps me get peace of mind, giving my clients good advice on how to handle this.
Really appreciate that. Wyatt. Glad that it's working as intended. And, one note on that, checking in every 6 months, right? If the bag has been tampered with, you probably need a new trustee, right?
Yeah, fair. Yeah, that's totally fair.
If you're a financial professional working with Bitcoin, you know the pain of messy CSVs, broken cost basis, and accounting tools that were never built for this asset. Bitmint fixes that. Bitmint is the Bitcoin native accounting platform built for CPAs, bookkeepers, advisors, miners, and serious Bitcoin investors. You get clean Bitcoin bank statements, reliable cost basis tracking, full reporting, and fiat integration through Plaid. No crypto talk, no workarounds, just proper accounting for the hardest money on earth. Create a free account or book a demo at bitmint.co today.
So I think an interesting conundrum for folks building businesses, in the Bitcoin space, obviously, like your low-hanging fruit target market's like probably going to be Bitcoiners, but after you reach a certain amount of scale, and as Bitcoin, kind of just does its thing and continues to grow and reach new people, your target market expands. And so Unchained has been super supportive of the Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin ecosystem. You guys sponsor a ton of events, meetups, conferences, like really the whole gamut. I think you guys make a great effort. If you are represented somewhere, putting boots on the ground, you have like an Unchained representative to talk to the product. And then recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's more than recently, you guys are kind of moving, out of like Bitcoin events or Bitcoin specific things into, energy or, broader, finance, conferences and meetups. How have you guys kind of thought about tapping the Bitcoin community, continue support, sponsor conferences, and then, also extending an olive branch to different industries and potentially onboarding them?
Sure. I think it's a two-pronged approach where we're not going to let go what we've already been doing well, which is the presence at the Bitcoin only events. You'll see us at Big Block Boom in a couple weeks down in Texas, and then of course, the majority of the team will be out in Vegas there in a couple more weeks. But the second prong of that is the tangential networks and marketing, right? And so I've been to a couple events recently, like for instance with the Colorado Technology Association, as well as some other local networking events. But the point being there is that I think Bitcoiners often fall into this trap of thinking that, it's been around for 15 or 16 years, right? Like you had to have, like if you weren't living under a rock and you have any inclination, like you should get Bitcoin by now, right? And I guess what I would say is what we found is I don't believe that that's actually the case. I believe that you actually have a lot of smart folks out there who are in their own lane, whatever their craft might be, and they're trying to provide for their family, and they're getting hit on both sides by inflation and taxation, and they just haven't had the time. And that's what I pulled from a couple of these recent events is that, I still believe the biggest danger to Bitcoin is apathy, is that we have a whole society of NPCs and sheeple who don't care, right, enough to, and we devolve into the movie Idiocracy, if you've ever seen that, where we have Powerade coming out of the water fountains and stuff.
I've never seen that movie. No.
Oh, it's worth a watch. But the point there being is that I still believe that there's a ton of opportunity, but it's going to take twice as much work as we've already put in, and it's going to be person by person if we don't want to wait for the whole change happens one funeral at a time morbid outlook, right? And that's boots on the ground at these Bitcoin only events, or go to your local tech networking event, right? Go to your there's tons of stuff on Eventbrite, on meetup.com, that there's other folks out there looking to learn, and most folks who aren't in the financial space kind of have an inkling of something's wrong. I just can't figure out quite what it is. Like I know I feel like I'm on a treadmill. I get the extra job and things don't really change. So when you can kind of pull that veil up them for a little bit and let them know that there are tons of intelligent people working on this, and you complement that with something like a physical space, like the space in Denver, where you now have the world's first hot tub heated with Bitcoin mining, right? Like if that doesn't perk your ear up a little bit, okay, maybe we're not gonna you're not gonna eventually figure this out. But I think for anybody who has an inkling of curiosity, and I think a little bit of pain, those are usually the prereqs. Knowing that there's folks out here like us and you guys at Basilic and Jordan with Bitment, I think there's plenty of work to be done. So let's not rest on our laurels. Of course we could sit back, but like I'm in the camp of let's accelerate this so that we can see the benefit of living on a hard money standard, ideally while you and I are healthy.
Yeah, right. No, I appreciate that. That's something I go back and forth with a lot. Like, is my time and efforts better spent targeting Bitcoiners? Should you reach outside of that, try to get more people in the fold? Obviously, you mentioned too, it's like time is, the most scarce resource. So, allocating that efficiently. And, something I want to end with here that you mentioned, obviously, our audience is more, financial services focused, RIAs, CPAs, estate planning attorneys, capital allocators, etc. What have you guys done in exchange to specifically reach out to those folks? Is that kind of like a growth cohort you see is servicing? You get one of me on, you get an additional, 10, 20, 30 clients like that are now using the Unchained platform, whatever it may be. How are you specifically thinking about marketing and reaching out to these kind of folks?
Yeah, so in the past, there's definitely been some friction there with product requirements, et cetera. And I think we've come a long way on the reporting side of things, the visibility side, the permissions, right? So you might be able to view an account and not necessarily take any action. And this is a space that we are really excited for meeting folks, and helping them, and we want to be a resource. I think it's part of that issue where there's still a lot of advisors and RIAs and financial folks who, this thing was a career risk for the better part of the last decade, right? So that is definitely going to take time. But what I would say to those folks, if this is a little thing at the bottom of your checklist, like, hey, I gotta have some sort of Bitcoin strategy, or I have to look deeper into this, like, come talk to us. Like, we have, I would argue, the best sales team in the world, and we're distributed across the country. So, no matter where you are, one of our folks is going to be happy to come, meet you for a coffee or meet with your firm. Like, right, for instance, this example I used earlier, where it was a, business leader, who just hadn't had much education on Bitcoin keys and never thought that, a business could hold it because of that issue with concentrating the risk in terms of one person. I had a call with him, and then from there we were able to meet with his entire group, because he works with a bunch of CFOs and controllers who probably make the final say for their business in terms of whether or not they could even have a Bitcoin approach. So being able to come at it from there, almost a more top-down approach, I think is beautiful, because after a career in software sales as well, like you can do everything right from a sales perspective, and then you get chopped down by the CFO, right? Because he wasn't aware of what's going on, or you didn't really fit into his budget. So we want to work more with these type of folks, and I think as the toolkit gets built out with things like Bitmint and Satoshi Pacioli, it's just going to make it easier for us to all collaborate. But please, see Unchained as the Bitcoin infrastructure in your toolkit, along with a team who will teach you whatever you and your clients need to know about Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I can personally vouch for that. Actual last thing, because you just saved me from the wrath of Jordan. One of the things he wanted us to talk about is, like, you guys have added a lot of reporting features and stuff. 1099 DAs, big talking point right now. They're specifically addressing it at Satoshi Pacioli and Bitman, just to make Bitcoiners' life easier, especially when it comes from tax perspective. You guys are kind of unique. I know a lot of my clients, at least anecdotally, they're still buying exchanges and then moving Bitcoin over, as you mentioned earlier, in larger UTXO chunks. A few clients that utilize like the trade desk. So how are you guys kind of handling that? Because you're kind of in a unique situation where a lot of, I imagine, Bitcoin secured through Unchained isn't natively bought at Unchained, and so it leaves you guys in maybe a little bit of a predicament from a reporting perspective. So I want you shed some insight on what you guys have done recently on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I am obviously far from a tax expert and can provide no, tax, finance, or legal advice, but could definitely provide my two cents here. And where we stand with that is that we are, by law, going to provide those forms to all of our clients. And then, they will be, to my knowledge, as complete as possible. Obviously, for any Bitcoin that wasn't purchased through Unchained, there's not going to be a cost basis for that, right? So that's going to be up to the individual and the folks that they're filing with to extrapolate that based on their previous records, and so from a general approach there, we are of the stance that we're obviously going to comply with any sort of requests, like legal requests for information, but to the minimum, that we can. So we, stand here with Bitcoiners with privacy and security at our core, given that, these reporting requirements are changing over time. We will stay up to date with them, as they develop.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of like the best of both worlds. Take responsibility for knowing your cost basis. There are a lot of tools coming out, like Bitman, to make that easier. Unchained as a service provider, they'll help you, but ultimately not your responsibility. And I don't even mean that in like a bad way. Like, you guys are dodging it. Like, you literally don't know my cost basis of Bitcoin. I bought a river and moved into Unchained. Actual last thing, I promise, but I think we would be remiss not to talk about this. I had intentions to earlier, but questions I get, I'm sure you get as well, I think are specifically important for folks in the financial services industry, is you guys have kind of architectured and constructed Unchained. It's like, well, what if Unchained goes out of business tomorrow? Like, what happens to my Bitcoin? You have this open source, Caravan wallet, very similar to, Sparrow. So you can actually recreate the wallet and still move your Bitcoin, very sound. Why don't you kind of just walk us mechanically through how that works, how you guys address that concern?
Absolutely. So, again, on the ethos of no single points of failure, right? If Unchained was to disappear overnight, you as a client are fine as long as you have the knowledge of how to interact with your wallet configuration file. That's the kind of map file that's generated for each multi-sig vault, if you will, and it lives directly in our platform. And then our best practices is that you download a couple copies for this exact instance. But simply what's required is that you utilize free and open source multi-sig coordinator software such as Caravan or Electrum or Sparrow. These are different options that you could utilize, where those coordinators will basically take the combination of your config file and then allow you to sign with your two keys to move the Bitcoin completely independent of Unchained. So that also gives clients a lot of extra peace of mind in terms of, hey, yes, like I know there's these small trade-offs in terms of you guys knowing my balance, etc. But knowing that I can't go down with the Unchained ship is huge for me after every, Celsius, BlockFi type of blow up I've seen over the last 10 years.
Totally. Yeah, and just personally, I generally instruct clients, like if they're holding both keys, download the configuration file, keep that unencrypted, flash drive, like you said, a couple of copies, and we're able to pretty much weather any storm, that can come our way. And so just another, crucial piece of building a quality Bitcoin financial services company I think you guys have taken upon yourself.
100%. And one more follow through with that is if you're the type of person that's like, hey man, like you just said a bunch of word salad and said like, if I know what I need to know, I can get my Bitcoin. If you don't feel like that, that's fine. Like I would welcome you to come work with our team, use our signature service for a year and have that account management to walk you through this. And you and your family can get on a call and you can do a mock recovery process, right? So it's not just theoretical. It's like, hey, we see how it actually works. And now we've removed the uncertainty from what it looks like if something happens to Unchained. We have a concrete path forward.
Totally. That's tremendous. This has been a tremendous conversation. Where can folks find you, Ben?
They can find me. So I am our director of sales for Unchained in Colorado. And shortly I'll be handling more of the Mountain West here. So if you're in Colorado or this general area, feel free to reach out to me, just benjamin@unchained.com. I'm also on X at Bitcoin Benji, BENJIII, 3 I's. And then I do as much as I can on the ground. So I'm on the board of directors here of the space, Denver. So if you're ever in town, feel free to give me a ring and we could set up some time there. And then I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I run the local meetup up here. So we have a small, thriving community of Bitcoiners, and our mission this year is to increase merchant adoption. So if you're out in Boulder and Denver, open up your Cash App map and see where you can spend Bitcoin, and let's get this thing going in rotation, because it starts as a store of value, then we go to medium of exchange, and eventually unit of account.
That's right, man. Thanks so much, brother. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wyatt. Take care.
We appreciate you joining us. If you want to help build the future of Bitcoin and financial services, hit subscribe, leave a review, sign up for a newsletter, and most importantly, share this with someone in your network who's integrating Bitcoin into their practice. The more professionals we reach, the better served our clients are. Stay sharp, stay sovereign, keep leading from the front.